In the dust-swept corner of Colorado Territory, 1873, a deadly confrontation is about to unfold. When the notorious Crimson Riders decide to claim Whiskey Creek's only saloon as their new stronghold, they think they're dealing with just another weary bartender. They couldn't be more wrong. Samuel Steady Hand Cooper isn't your typical saloon keeper. For 4 brutal years, he was the most skilled field medic in the Union Army, saving lives in the bloodiest battles of the Civil War. His nickname wasn't earned from pouring drinks. It came from performing surgeries under heavy fire where a trembling hand meant certain death. Now, behind his bar of polished oak and gleaming bottles, he's about to show 7 hardened killers why a man who knows how to save lives is equally skilled at ending them. This isn't just another tale of frontier justice. This is the story of how the deadliest gang in the territory learned that some healers never forget their lessons from war. When they turned his peaceful saloon into a battleground, they didn't realize they were facing a man who could turn every bottle, glass, and medicinal tincture into a weapon. What follows is the account of how one former combat medic transformed a simple saloon into a killing ground, using nothing but his wit, his steady hands, and the dark wisdom that only a battlefield surgeon could possess. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of Cooper's place, catching dust motes that danced above the freshly swept floor. Samuel Cooper moved with practiced efficiency behind his bar, arranging bottles with the same precision he once used to lay out surgical instruments. Each glass had its place, each bottle its purpose, much like the tools that had once saved countless lives on blood-soaked battlefields. The regulars knew him as the quiet man who could pour the perfect whiskey and listen to their troubles without judgment. None of them knew about the nightmares that still plagued him, memories of screaming men holding their own entrails, of amputations performed by candlelight as Confederate artillery lit up the sky. They didn't see how he sometimes held a bottle the way he used to hold a bone saw, or how his eyes occasionally drifted to the small medical bag hidden beneath the bar, its contents unchanged since Appomattox. His saloon had become more than just a business. It was his sanctuary, a place where he could atone for the lives he couldn't save by offering comfort to the living. The locals respected his privacy, never questioning why a man with such steady hands would choose to serve drinks in a dusty frontier town when any medical practice in the East would have welcomed him. Those hands moved now across the polished oak bar, cleaning already spotless surfaces. It was a habit born from years of keeping surgical areas sterile, a routine that had saved as many lives as his actual medical skills. The morning light caught the silver threads in his dark hair, earned more from battlefield trauma than age. At 42, Samuel Cooper carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had seen humanity at its worst and chosen to believe in its better nature anyway. In the corner, old Tom Jenkins nursed his morning coffee, the same seat he'd occupied every day for the past 3 years. The old prospector had been Cooper's first friend in Whiskey Creek, never pushing for details about the past that haunted the barkeeper's eyes. Now he sat reading a week-old newspaper, occasionally glancing up as Cooper prepared for another day of business. "You hear about them Crimson Riders?" Jenkins asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Word is, they've been moving north, taking what they want. 3 saloons hit in the last month alone." Cooper's hands didn't pause in their work, but something flickered behind his eyes. A shadow of the man he'd been when split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. "Plenty of saloons in the territory," he replied, his voice carrying the soft drawl of his Virginia upbringing. "No reason for them to visit our little creek." But even as he spoke the words, his fingers traced the edge of the bar where he'd installed a hidden compartment on his first day of ownership. Inside lay the tools of his former trade, not the surgical instruments he'd used to heal, but the weapons he'd carried to protect his field hospital from raiders who didn't respect the sanctity of a medical flag. The morning light continued to creep across the floor, warming the wooden planks that Cooper had laid himself. Each board had been carefully selected and placed, creating subtle grooves and patterns that only he knew the purpose of. Every bottle on his shelves, every piece of furniture, every seemingly decorative feature had been chosen with the careful deliberation of a man who understood that preparation meant survival. In the streets outside, Whiskey Creek was coming to life. The smithy's hammer rang out its morning song, and the scent of fresh bread drifted from the Widow Chen's bakery. It was a peaceful town, the kind of place a man might choose to forget his past. But Samuel Cooper knew better than most that the past had a way of finding you, no matter how far you ran or how carefully you hid. He straightened a row of glasses, each one positioned to catch the light just so, creating small prisms that allowed him to monitor every corner of his establishment. The war had taught him that survival often depended on seeing trouble before it saw you. As he worked, his fingers brushed against the small brass bell under the bar. Another of his carefully planned modifications. 3 rings meant trouble, 2 meant get out, 1 meant someone was about to die. Whiskey Creek hadn't earned its name from the Saloon. The story went that the first settlers found the creek's waters had a peculiar amber tint and a sweetness that reminded them of good bourbon. These days, the water ran clear, but the name stuck, much like the people who called this valley home. The town had grown around Cooper's place, like vines around a sturdy oak. Sheriff Mills kept his office directly across the street, though he spent more time in Cooper's establishment than behind his own desk. He claimed it was to keep an eye on trouble, but everyone knew he came for Cooper's coffee and conversation. The sheriff was one of the few who suspected there was more to the barkeep than met the eye, having served in the war himself, though on the Confederate side. "War's over, Cooper," he'd said once, after too many whiskeys. "Whatever you're carrying, you can set it down here." But Cooper knew better. Some burdens weren't meant to be set down. They were meant to be transformed into something useful. Sarah Mackenzie, the schoolteacher, came in every Thursday for her weekly glass of sherry. She'd lost her husband at Gettysburg, though she never spoke of it. Cooper served her with extra care, recognizing the weight of unspoken grief in her eyes. She taught the town's children in a one-room schoolhouse, including little Mary Chen, whose mother's bakery filled the morning air with the scent of hope and new beginnings. The town's doctor, Franklin Pierce, no relation to the president, as he was quick to point out, relied on Cooper more than anyone knew. On quiet nights, they'd discuss medical techniques, with Pierce marveling at Cooper's knowledge. "You've got the hands of a surgeon," he'd observed once. Cooper had simply smiled and poured another drink. Whiskey Creek wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The railroad was talking about putting in a station, and new families arrived every month, drawn by the promise of silver in the hills and fertile soil in the valley. Cooper watched it all from behind his bar, taking quiet satisfaction in being part of something growing instead of dying. Even the local Ute tribe had come to respect the town's boundaries, thanks in part to Cooper's fair trading and medical assistance when needed. He'd earned their trust one winter night when he rode out in a blizzard to save the chief's youngest son from a rattlesnake bite. The tribe's medicine man had later gifted him with a leather pouch of healing herbs, which now hung beside his other medicinal supplies. The saloon itself had become more than just a drinking establishment. It was the town's heartbeat, where miners shared tales of rich strikes, ranchers negotiated grazing rights, and young couples stole glances across crowded tables. Cooper had installed extra lighting, claiming it was to prevent cheating at cards, but the mirrors and lamps were positioned to eliminate any dark corners where trouble might brew. Every Saturday night, Widow Chen would bring over fresh dumplings, a taste of her homeland that had become as much a part of Whiskey Creek as beef stew and cornbread. Cooper had modified his storage room to keep them warm, using principles of heat circulation he'd learned in field hospitals. But beneath this peaceful facade, Cooper maintained his vigilance. Each friendly conversation was also an intelligence-gathering operation. Every piece of gossip could contain vital information about movements in the territory. He kept a detailed mental map of everyone who passed through his doors, noting unusual patterns or strangers who asked too many questions. The town's prosperity had not gone unnoticed in the territory. Reports of the Crimson Riders' activities grew more frequent, each tale worse than the last. They weren't simple bandits. They were systematic, brutal, and efficient. They didn't just rob places. They took them over, using them as bases for larger operations. Cooper knew the signs. He'd seen similar patterns in the war when guerrilla raiders would target strategic locations. His saloon, with its clear view of the valley's main approach and its central location in town, would make an ideal stronghold for anyone looking to control the region. As he watched the sun set through his carefully positioned windows, Cooper realized that Whiskey Creek's promise might be its greatest vulnerability. Success attracted predators, and peace often came with a price. He'd built something worth protecting here, and he would protect it, one way or another. The nightmares always came with the changing seasons. As autumn's first chill crept into the valley, Cooper's dreams filled with the sounds he could never forget. The wet thud of amputated limbs hitting canvas tent floors, the rattling gasps of men drowning in their own blood, the screams that made him wish he was deaf. Tonight was no different. He sat alone in his quarters above the saloon, a single lamp burning as he methodically cleaned and checked his hidden arsenal. The tools laid out before him told the story of a man who understood that healing and hurting were two sides of the same coin. A bone saw, kept razor sharp, could serve as a weapon just as easily as it could save a life. Surgical needles, when placed precisely, could paralyze as effectively as they could suture. The war had taught him anatomy in ways no medical school ever could. He knew exactly where to strike, to disable, to incapacitate, to kill. Every lesson learned saving lives had shown him how those lives could be taken. It was knowledge he carried like a burden, used only 3 times since arriving in Whiskey Creek, each time with surgical precision, each body disposed of so carefully that no one ever knew. They had all been bad men, the kind that threatened the peace he'd built here. A would-be rapist who thought the school teacher an easy target. A cattle rustler who'd pulled a knife on Widow Chen. A bounty hunter who tried to murder an innocent man in Cooper's own establishment. None of them were ever found, their bodies hidden in the old mining shafts whose locations Cooper had carefully mapped. His fingers traced the worn leather of his medical bag, remembering the day at Antietam when he'd first learned that saving lives sometimes meant taking them. Confederate raiders had attacked his field hospital, ignoring the medical flag. He'd watched them gun down 2 wounded soldiers before reaching for the instruments that would become his first weapons. That day had changed him. He'd discovered he could move through chaos with the same steady hands he used in surgery. His knowledge of anatomy made every strike devastating, each movement precise. The raiders never stood a chance against a man who knew exactly where to cut. The army had noticed. They'd given him additional training, teaching him to combine his medical expertise with combat skills. He became something new, a healer who could kill with terrifying efficiency. Other surgeons worked in the rear. Cooper was sent to the front lines, where his unique abilities could serve multiple purposes. By war's end, his reputation had grown into something that made him uncomfortable. Soldiers whispered about the surgeon who could save your life or end it with equal skill. Some called him an angel of mercy, Others, something far darker. Cooper had chosen to disappear, seeking redemption in small acts of kindness and healing. But he never stopped preparing. The saloon's design was a testament to his paranoia, or perhaps his wisdom. Every piece of furniture could become a weapon, or a shield. Bottles were arranged not just for show, but as potential projectiles. The bar itself contained hidden compartments filled with medical supplies that could save lives or end them. He'd installed a complex system of pulleys and counterweights, all disguised as ordinary fixtures. With a single pull of the right rope, he could lock down sections of the saloon or create escape routes. The ceiling's support beams had been carefully reinforced to bear his weight, allowing him to move above the main floor, unseen. Cooper closed. His medical bag, each instrument returned to its proper place. The organization was compulsive, born from years of knowing that fumbling for the right tool could mean death for his patient or himself. He'd sworn an oath to do no harm, but experience had taught him that sometimes harm was necessary to prevent greater suffering. As he prepared for bed, his mind turned to the rumors of the Crimson Riders. Their pattern of violence was familiar. Not just banditry, but systematic terror designed to break a community's spirit. He'd seen similar tactics during the war, had fought against men who thought brutality was strength. The night air carried the scent of approaching winter, and with it, the certainty that peace couldn't last forever. Cooper extinguished his lamp, but remained by the window, watching the moonlit street below. His hands, as always, were steady, ready to either heal or harm, as circumstances required. Some wars, he knew, never really ended. They just changed battlefields. They came at sunset, when the dying light painted Whiskey Creek's main street in shades of blood and gold. 7 riders, their horses' hooves kicking up dust that glowed crimson in the fading day. Cooper noticed them before anyone else, his trained, eye-catching the telltale signs. Horses too well bred for common bandits, rifles too new, clothes too fine, but deliberately weathered. The saloon had the usual early evening crowd. Jenkins at his corner table, Sarah Mackenzie finishing her Thursday. Sherry, 3 miners fresh from their claim sharing a bottle of bourbon. Sheriff Mills had left an hour ago to make his rounds. Cooper's fingers brushed the brass bell under the bar, but he waited, watching, assessing. The leader entered first, a tall man with eyes the color of winter ice and a cavalry officer's bearing. His gun belt was worn but well oiled. The revolver, holstered with the grip forward, a shooter's preference. The others followed in practiced formation, spreading out across the room with military precision. These weren't common bandits. They moved like soldiers. "Quiet little place you have here," the leader said, his voice carrying the refined accent of an educated man. He removed his hat, revealing graying temples and a scar that ran from his left ear to his collar. "Good location, clear views of the street, solid construction." His eyes met Cooper's. "Strategic." Cooper kept wiping the glass in his hands, his movements unhurried. "We're simple folk here," he said, noting how the others had positioned themselves. 1 by the front window, 2 near the back door, 3 spread among the tables. The locals had gone quiet, sensing the tension crackling in the air like heat lightning before a storm. "Simple folk," the leader repeated, smiling without warmth. "Like you, Dr. Cooper?" The glass in Cooper's hands didn't pause its circular motion, but his mind raced. It had been years since anyone had called him that. The leader stepped closer to the bar, close enough for Cooper to smell tobacco and gunpowder. "You're a hard man to find," the leader continued, "the surgeon who could cut a man's throat as cleanly as he could save his life, the angel of mercy who became death's own apprentice." He placed his hands on the bar, and Cooper noticed old powder burns on his knuckles. "I've been looking for you for a very long time." The evening shadows lengthened across the floor, following the patterns Cooper had carefully laid in the wooden boards. Sarah Mackenzie's hand trembled slightly as she set down her sherry glass. The miners had gone still, their weathered faces tight with tension. "You have me at a disadvantage," Cooper said, finally setting down the glass. His fingers itched to reach for the bell, but something held him back. There was more here than a simple robbery. "Colonel James Blackwood," the leader said. "Though, these days, most people just call me the Crimson Rider." He smiled again, and this time there was something almost genuine in it, like a wolf showing appreciation for worthy prey. "You don't remember me, do you? Antietam, the field hospital. You killed 6 of my men that day." Memory flashed like lightning in Cooper's mind. The raiders who'd attacked his hospital, the ones who'd ignored the medical flag. He'd never known who they were, had assumed they were just another band of guerrillas. But now, looking into Blackwood's eyes, he saw the truth. They'd been a cavalry unit turned rogue. "They were killing wounded soldiers," Cooper said quietly. "They were following orders. My orders." Blackwood's voice carried no anger, just cold certainty. "That day I learned something important about you, Doctor. You're not just a healer. You're a killer who hides behind a healer's oath, and now," he gestured around the saloon, "you're hiding behind a bartender's apron. But I see you, the real you." The sun had almost set now, casting long shadows through the windows. Cooper's carefully arranged bottles gleamed like amber sentinels on their shelves. In the fading light, he could see his own reflection in Blackwood's eyes, and for a moment he saw what the colonel saw, not the quiet bartender, but the surgeon who had dealt death with precise hands. "What do you want?" Cooper asked, though he already knew the answer. "Why, Doctor," Blackwood said, spreading his arms wide, "I want everything, your saloon, your town, and most of all—" His smile turned predatory. "I want to show everyone exactly what kind of man their beloved bartender really is." The first drop of blood hit the bar like a crimson tear. It came from Jenkins, old loyal Jenkins, who'd tried to slip out the back door to warn the sheriff, only to be caught by one of Blackwood's men. They dragged him back, his nose bleeding, and threw him into a chair. The sound of his body hitting the wood echoed through the suddenly silent saloon. "Now that was foolish," Blackwood said, not even turning to look at Jenkins. His eyes remained fixed on Cooper. "Though I suppose loyalty is never truly foolish, is it, Doctor? Your patients were loyal too. They never revealed where you'd gone, no matter how persuasively we asked." Cooper's hand tensed on the glass he was still holding. The implications in Blackwood's words sent a chill through his spine. "You hunted them down? Wounded soldiers? Civilians?" "I hunted information," Blackwood corrected, as if explaining something simple to a child. "Just as I'm doing now. You see, Doctor, this isn't just about a saloon. This town, this valley, it's perfect. Remote enough to operate freely, close enough to the rail line for our purposes. But first," he drew his revolver, "with practiced ease. A demonstration." The gun's report was deafening in the enclosed space. Sarah Mackenzie screamed as the mirror behind the bar shattered, sending a cascade of glittering shards across the floor. Cooper didn't flinch. He'd heard too many gunshots to fear their sound. "Your reflexes are still good," Blackwood observed. "You didn't even blink, but then you never did you? Even when you were cutting through flesh and bone, your hands never trembled." He gestured to his men. "Search the place thoroughly. Our good doctor wouldn't have left his tools far from reach." The miners made a move to protest, but Cooper caught their eye and subtly shook his head. "Not yet." The odds weren't right. 5 of Blackwood's men spread out, beginning their search, while one remained by the door, his rifle ready. "You won't find what you're looking for," Cooper said calmly, though his mind was racing through scenarios, counting seconds, measuring distances. The brass bell beneath the bar seemed to burn against his fingers. Blackwood laughed, a sound without mirth. "Oh, but I already have. You see, Doctor, I've spent years studying you. The way you think, the way you operate." He moved closer to the bar, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Did you think I didn't notice? The sight lines you've created, the escape routes you've prepared, the weapons you've hidden. This isn't just a saloon, it's a fortress. Your fortress. A crash came from the back room as one of the men tore through Cooper's supplies. The sound of breaking glass and splintering wood carried clearly. Sarah Mackenzie was silently crying now, her hands gripping her sherry glass so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Boss!" one of the men called out. "Found something!" He emerged from the back holding Cooper's medical bag. The worn leather seemed to absorb the failing light, looking more like an executioner's kit than a healer's tools. Blackwood's smile widened. "Ah, there we are. Still keeping your instruments close, Doctor? Old habits die hard, don't they?" He gestured with his gun. "Open it." The man fumbled with the bag's straps, but before he could open it, Cooper spoke. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." "No?" Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "And why not?" "Because," Cooper said softly, "a surgeon's tools should only be handled by a surgeon's hands." The man with the bag screamed. Blood erupted from between his fingers where hidden needles had pierced his flesh. He dropped the bag, staggering backward, his face already growing pale from the fast-acting sedative Cooper had coated the needles with. "Impressive," Blackwood said, watching his man collapse. "But surely you don't think—" The rest of his words were lost as Cooper finally rang the brass bell. Once, the sound hung in the air like a death knell, and then all hell broke loose. The single bell tone was still echoing when the saloon plunged into darkness. Cooper had pulled a hidden lever, dropping heavy shutters over every window with a synchronized thud. Only the fading sunlight through the shattered mirror behind the bar provided any illumination, casting fractured shadows across the chaos that erupted. "Get him!" Blackwood's roar was followed by gunshots, but Cooper was already moving. His hands found familiar holds beneath the bar, and with one fluid motion he pulled himself through a concealed trapdoor. The space beneath the bar was his first line of defense, a narrow corridor he'd built into the foundation, lined with weapons and medical supplies. Above, boots thundered across the floorboards. Cooper could track each position by the sound, mentally mapping their movements against the layout he knew by heart. The locals had gone silent. They knew enough to stay down, to become part of the furniture. All except Jenkins, who began, singing an old Confederate battle song, deliberately drawing attention. "Shut that old man up," Blackwood commanded, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. The darkness had stripped him of his advantage, and now he was fighting on Cooper's battlefield. Cooper moved silently through his hidden passage, emerging behind the stacked barrels in the storage room. Through gaps in the wooden slats, he could see two of Blackwood's men searching systematically, their gun hands betraying military training. The first man never saw the wire at ankle height, a tripwire connected to a counterweight that sent a barrel crashing into his legs. As he fell, Cooper emerged from his hiding spot, driving a surgically sharp blade into a precise point between the second man's shoulder blades, severing the spine without hitting a single major blood vessel. The man dropped silently, paralyzed. But alive! The crash of the barrel brought running feet. Cooper retreated into the shadows of the storage room's high shelves, which he'd arranged to create a maze-like pattern. He'd spent years memorizing this space, learning to move through it blindfolded. Now that practice paid off as he navigated by touch alone. "He's playing with us," one of the men whispered, fear creeping into his voice, "like a cat with mice." "Shut up," another responded. "He's just one man." "No," Blackwood's voice cut through the darkness. "He's not just a man. He's a surgeon. Every move he makes is planned, precise. He knows exactly where to cut to make you hurt, to make you bleed, to make you die slow." A pause. "But he's also a coward, hiding in the dark." "What kind of healer?" "Kills from the shadows, Doctor." Cooper's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, thanks to the acoustic tricks he'd built into the walls. "A healer knows how to end suffering quickly, but for men like you who prey on the helpless—" The words drifted through the darkness like smoke. Sometimes suffering should be prolonged. A bottle exploded near Blackwood's head, the sound making his men jump. Cooper had rigged certain bottles with black powder, just enough to create chaos, not enough to cause real damage, but they didn't know that. In the main room, Jenkins had stopped singing. The silence was broken only by the scattered whimpers of frightened patrons and the increasingly panicked breathing of Blackwood's remaining men. The darkness was Cooper's ally now, transforming his saloon into a surgical theater where he alone knew the instruments. "Your hands may be steady, Doctor," Blackwood called out, "but they're still stained with blood. How many men have you killed since you took that oath to heal? How many lives have you ended in the name of protection?" Cooper moved through another hidden passage, this one leading behind the bar. His voice floated down from somewhere near the ceiling. "I've killed exactly as many as necessary, no more." His fingers found a familiar rope, one of many controlling the saloon's defenses, and no less. He pulled, and another set of mechanisms activated. The floor beneath two of Blackwood's men suddenly tilted, sending them stumbling into a prepared trap. Sharp metal implements, repurposed surgical tools, caught them in non-lethal but agonizing ways. Their screams were a symphony of precisely orchestrated pain. "You see, Colonel," Cooper continued, "a surgeon doesn't just know how to kill. He knows how to keep you alive while he works. Shall I demonstrate further?" The groans of Blackwood's injured men filled the darkened saloon. Cooper moved silently through another hidden passage, retrieving his medical bag from where it had fallen. The familiar weight of it in his hands brought back memories of battlefield. Triage, deciding who could be saved and who was beyond help. "Your men are still alive, Colonel," Cooper called out, his voice echoing through the carefully designed acoustics. "That one by the storage room? Severed spine, but breathing. The two who triggered the floor trap, severe lacerations but nothing fatal yet." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "They need a surgeon." Blackwood's laugh was harsh in the darkness. "And you're offering your services? How charitable of you, Doctor." "I'm offering you a choice." Cooper's hands moved through his bag, by touch alone, selecting instruments with practiced precision. "Surrender now, and I'll save them. Continue this fight, and I'll show you exactly how much pain a man can survive." A gunshot answered him, the bullet splintering wood where Cooper's voice had seemed to come from. But he was already elsewhere, moving through his maze of passages like a ghost. "You think these parlor tricks impress me?" Blackwood's voice had an edge now, frustration bleeding through his control. "I've seen what you really are." Antietam showed us both the truth. You're not a healer, you're a butcher with a medical degree. The remaining men were clustering closer to Blackwood, seeking protection in numbers. Cooper could hear their movements, count their steps. 3 still combat effective, plus Blackwood. The odds were improving. "Tell me, Colonel," Cooper said, using the acoustics to make his voice seem to circle them. "Did you ever wonder why I chose this place? This town?" He triggered another mechanism, and somewhere in the darkness gears turned. A surgeon needs a proper theater to work. The floor shifted subtly beneath their feet, another of Cooper's modifications. The wooden boards had been laid to channel movement to guide unwary feet exactly where he wanted them. "A saloon at a crossroads," Cooper continued. "High ground with clear views, multiple escape routes, perfect for a man who never wants to be surprised again." A bottle shattered near one of the men, making him jump and stumble into position. Perfect for a man who knows that sometimes the best way to heal is to prevent the wound in the first place. "By becoming the wound?" Blackwood challenged. "You're not protecting these people, Doctor, you're using them. Just like you use those wounded soldiers as cover for your real work." Sarah Mackenzie's quiet voice cut through the darkness. "That's not true." Her words trembled but held firm. "He saved my Henry when the fever took him last winter, sat with him 3 days straight. Fixed my arm when the mine collapsed," one of the miners added. "Didn't take a penny." "Enough!" Blackwood's shout was, followed by another gunshot, this one striking one of his own men who had stumbled into his line of fire. The man's cry of pain was cut short as Cooper emerged from the shadows behind him, catching him before he fell. Arterial bleeding, Cooper announced clinically, his hands already applying pressure to the wound. "He has minutes, Colonel. Your shot nicked the brachial artery." His voice hardened. "I can save him, but first we negotiate." The injured man whimpered as Cooper's skilled hands stemmed the blood flow. Even in the darkness, his movements were precise, each touch calculated. "What's your bargain, Doctor?" Blackwood's voice had changed, the first hint of uncertainty creeping in. "You and your men leave Whiskey Creek. Never return. I'll patch them up, give them a fighting chance. Stay." Cooper's hands tightened slightly on the injured man's arm, drawing a gasp of pain. "And I'll show you exactly what a battlefield surgeon learned about ending lives." Silence stretched in the darkness, broken only by the wounded man's labored breathing. Cooper could practically hear Blackwood's mind working, calculating odds, weighing options. "And if I refuse?" Blackwood finally asked. "Then I'll save this man's life anyway," Cooper said quietly. "Because that's what a healer does. But after, I'll give you a personal demonstration of every technique I perfected during the war, starting with how to keep a man conscious long after he's begging for death." The words hung in the air like smoke. After a gunshot, and in the darkness, Cooper's steady hands continued their work, ready to either save or end lives as necessity dictated. Blackwood's answer came in the form of a bullet. The shot was meant for Cooper's head, but instead hit the crystal decanter behind him, sending shards of glass and amber liquid raining through the darkness. Cooper had already moved, his body, responding to the minute shift in Blackwood's stance that telegraphed his intent. "Wrong choice, Colonel," Cooper said, releasing the wounded man who slumped to the floor. His hands found the familiar instruments in his medical bag. Surgical. Scissors, retractors, bone saw. In the war, they'd saved lives. Tonight, they would serve a different purpose. The remaining men opened fire at Cooper's voice, but he was no longer there. He'd designed the saloon's acoustics to deceive, to make his voice dance like a ghost through the shadows. The gunshots illuminated the room in strobing flashes, revealing frozen tableaus of terror and determination. Cooper moved like water through his prepared passages, emerging behind one of the men. The surgical scissors found the precise point, where the skull met the spine. A quick, practiced motion, the same he'd used to save soldiers with skull fractures, and the man dropped without a sound. "2 combat effective left, Colonel," Cooper called out, already moving. 3, counting you. Would you like me to describe exactly what's happening to their nervous systems as they die? The medical details are fascinating. You're enjoying this, Blackwood accused, his voice raw. "All these years pretending to be a healer, but this is what you really are." A bottle exploded near one of the remaining men, the alcohol inside mixing with the black powder Cooper had packed it with. The flash temporarily blinded him, and Cooper struck. The bone saw made a different sound, cutting through cloth and flesh than it did through wood. The man's scream was cut short by a precision strike to his throat. "A surgeon understands that sometimes cutting is necessary to heal," Cooper said, his voice now seeming to come from the ceiling. "Just as a soldier understands that sometimes killing is necessary to protect." Something shifted in the darkness, a rope pulled, a mechanism activated. "But you, Colonel, you kill for pleasure. That's the difference between us." The last of Blackwood's men fired wildly into the shadows. His shots went wide, striking the carefully arranged bottles on the shelves. The breaking glass created a curtain of sound, masking Cooper's approach. The retractor found the man's carotid artery with surgical precision. "Do you know how long it takes to bleed out from a carotid wound, Colonel?" Cooper's clinical tone cut through the gurgling sounds of the dying man. "I do. I've saved men from it, and I've caused it. 7 minutes of consciousness, if done precisely. 10 minutes to death. Show yourself." Blackwood was alone now, his back against the bar. His gun swept the darkness in jerky arcs. "Face me like a man, you coward." "But I am facing you, Colonel." Cooper's voice was everywhere and nowhere. "I'm giving you a proper medical examination, evaluating your condition, making my diagnosis." Another mechanism triggered and more shutters dropped, blocking the last traces of light from the broken mirror. The darkness became absolute. "Your symptoms are clear," Cooper continued, moving silently through the black void he knew by heart. "Elevated heart rate, irregular breathing, acute stress response, the beginning stages of fear-induced shock." His voice shifted location with each sentence, drawing Blackwood's increasingly panicked shots. "Would you like to know your prognosis?" Blackwood's gun clicked empty. In the sudden silence, Cooper's steady hands found their final targets, pressure points he'd learned about in medical school and perfected on the battlefield. His touch was light, almost gentle, as he systematically shut down Blackwood's nervous system. "The prognosis," Cooper whispered in Blackwood's ear as the colonel's body began to fail him, "is terminal." The crack of a rifle shot shattered the silence. The bullet punched through one of the shuttered windows, letting in a sharp blade of moonlight. Cooper's victory had come too soon. Blackwood's backup had arrived. "Did you think," Blackwood wheezed through his partially paralyzed throat, "I'd come without insurance?" A weak laugh bubbled up. 20 more, outside, surrounding the building." Cooper's mind raced through calculations, his hands still pressed against Blackwood's pressure points, keeping him immobilized but alive. Outside, he could hear horses moving into position, the subtle creak of leather and steel that meant experienced gunmen taking aim. "Dr. Cooper," a voice called from outside, younger but carrying the same aristocratic accent as Blackwood. "This is Lieutenant Marcus Blackwood. I believe you have my father in there. You have 1 minute to release him or we start shooting civilians." The sound of struggling and frightened cries filtered through the broken window. They must have caught townspeople on the street, probably those trying to flee when they heard the gunfire. Cooper's fingers twitched against Blackwood's neck, feeling the colonel's pulse quicken with satisfaction. 30 seconds, Doctor," the younger Blackwood called out. "We have the school teacher's entire class out here, 16 children. How many can you save with those steady hands of yours?" Sarah Mackenzie sobbed quietly from her corner of the saloon. Cooper's mind flashed to little Mary Chen, to all the children he'd treated for scrapes and fevers. His surgical knowledge whispered to him how many ways a child's body could break, how quickly young lives could slip away. "Last chance," the lieutenant's voice carried the edge of a man ready to prove himself to his father. "Either my father walks out, or these children start dying." Cooper leaned close to Blackwood's ear. "Tell them to release the children." His fingers shifted slightly, sending waves of pain through the colonel's nervous system. "Or I'll demonstrate. Every technique I learned, treating field amputations, without anesthetic. You can't save them all," Blackwood managed through gritted teeth. "Choose, Doctor, your revenge, or their lives." The moonlight through the broken window illuminated the bar like a surgeon's lamp, highlighting the blood and broken glass. Cooper's carefully constructed fortress had become a trap, not just for his enemies, but for the innocents he'd sworn to protect. "Time's up," the lieutenant called. The sound of a hammer being cocked echoed through the night. "Bring out the first child!" "Wait!" Cooper's voice cut through the darkness. His hands moved from Blackwood's pressure points to his carotid artery. "Lieutenant, listen carefully. I'm going to explain exactly what's happening to your father's body right now." His tone shifted to the clinical precision of a medical lecture. "My fingers are pressing on his carotid artery. If I apply exactly 4 more pounds of pressure, I'll cut off blood flow to his brain. He'll lose consciousness in seconds, suffer brain death in minutes." Silence fell outside. Cooper continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I've spent years learning how to save lives. That means I know every way a human body can fail. Right now, your father is experiencing systematic nervous system shutdown. He can feel everything, but he can't move, can't fight back, can't stop what's coming. You're bluffing, the lieutenant called, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Ask him yourself, Cooper replied. Colonel, tell your son how it feels. Tell him about the creeping numbness, the way your lungs are struggling to draw breath. Tell him what it's like to be unmade by a surgeon's hands. Blackwood made a choking sound, not from pressure, but from fear. His pulse jumped erratically under Cooper's fingers. Release the children, Cooper commanded. All of them, or I'll give your father a detailed demonstration of battlefield surgery. And son, I'll make sure you can hear every scream. The night air filled with tense silence, broken only by the soft whimpers of frightened children and Blackwood's labored breathing. Cooper's hands remained steady, ready to either heal or harm as the next moments demanded. The choice, he knew, would reveal not just the lieutenant's character, but test the limits of his own oath to do no harm. The first sign was the smell, burning wood and melting lead. One of the stray bullets must have hit a lamp, igniting the alcohol-soaked floorboards. Cooper heard the distinctive whoosh of flames catching before he saw the orange glow beginning to illuminate the saloon's dark corners. Fire! The cry came from outside, tinged with panic. The building's on fire! Cooper's mind raced through the implications. The blaze would spread quickly, fed by spilled whiskey and wooden walls seasoned by years of alcohol fumes. The shuttered windows, his tactical advantage, now threatened to turn the saloon into an oven. Your choice just changed, Lieutenant, Cooper called out, his hand still steady on Blackwood's pressure points. Fire doesn't discriminate between soldiers and children. We have minutes before this whole building goes up. The flames cast dancing, shadows across the room, revealing the full tableau. Injured men sprawled across the floor, terrified patrons huddled in corners, and broken glass glinting like fallen stars. The heat was already building, making sweat trickle down Cooper's back. Let the children go, he continued, and I'll help you save your father. Keep them, and we all burn together. His fingers shifted slightly, making Blackwood gasp. Your father's already partially paralyzed. He can't walk out of here without my help. Outside, the sound of struggling children mixed with the crackling of flames. Cooper could hear the lieutenant conferring hurriedly with his men, their voices tense with indecision. The fire was spreading faster than expected, following patterns in the floorboards that Cooper had designed for liquid flow. Channels meant to direct spilled drinks now carried streams of flame. Smoke began to fill the upper portions of the room. You have medical supplies. The lieutenant's voice carried a note of desperation. You can treat him? I have everything I need, Cooper replied, already calculating angles and distances to his hidden caches. But only if we act now. The smoke will reach critical levels in minutes. A crash from above signaled the first structural damage. Burning debris fell from the ceiling, forcing Sarah Mackenzie to scramble away from her corner. The heat was becoming unbearable, turning the saloon into a furnace. Release them. The lieutenant's command was followed by the sounds of children being freed, their crying mixing with running footsteps. They're clear, Doctor. Now save my father. Cooper's hands moved with practiced efficiency, hitting precise points to restore partial mobility to Blackwood's limbs. I need to reach my supplies, he said, voice clinical despite the inferno building around them. The paralysis will return. Without proper treatment, the fire had created a hellish landscape of the once familiar saloon. Flames raced along the bar, consuming years of spilled alcohol. The heat made the remaining bottles explode like gunshots, sending shards of glass flying through the smoke-filled air. Lieutenant, Cooper called out while supporting Blackwood's weight, I'm going to need help. The main door is blocked by fire. There's a back exit through the storage room, but we'll have to move fast. His eyes tracked the spread of flames, noting how they followed his carefully planned patterns. Send 2 men, unarmed, anyone carrying Gunpowder in here now is just asking to become another casualty. The smoke was getting thicker, making breathing difficult. Cooper pulled a water-soaked cloth from his medical bag and pressed it over Blackwood's mouth and nose. His other hand maintained precise pressure on key nerve points, keeping the colonel compliant. Two men entered through the rear door, coughing. In the smoke, Cooper recognized their type immediately. Veteran soldiers, probably cavalry, from their stance and movement. They looked at their colonel with a mixture of fear and respect. "Follow my exact path," Cooper instructed, already. Moving, the floors designed with support beams in specific places. "Step where I step, or you'll fall through." They began their careful retreat through the burning building, Cooper guiding them between islands of relative safety in a sea of flame. Behind them, the main room of the saloon was fully engulfed, years of carefully laid plans going up in smoke. But Cooper allowed himself a small, grim smile. Fire had been part of his calculations from the beginning. After all, what better way to conceal evidence than with a cleansing blaze? And as they made their way through his burning fortress, he knew that Blackwood's men couldn't see how the flames were hurting them exactly where he wanted them to go. They emerged into the storage room to find it already thick with smoke, the air shimmering with heat. Cooper guided the group between towering shelves stocked with barrels and crates, each placement calculated years ago for this very possibility. The two soldiers struggled with Blackwood's weight, their movements growing clumsy from the heat and depleted oxygen. "Almost there," Cooper assured them, his voice steady despite the inferno. He kept one hand on Blackwood's neck, maintaining the precise pressure that prevented the colonel from either fighting back or falling completely paralyzed. "Just follow my lead." What the soldiers couldn't see through the smoke was how Cooper's path wound in a specific pattern, leading them deeper into his prepared maze rather than toward the exit. The fire followed them, but always at a controlled distance, herded by the building's hidden ventilation system. "Something's wrong," one of the soldiers coughed. "The door should be here." "The smoke's disorienting you," Cooper replied calmly, guiding them around another corner. "Trust me, I know every inch of this building." That much at least wasn't a lie. He'd spent 5 years memorizing this space, preparing for scenarios just like this. The heat was intense now, but Cooper had positioned barrels of water throughout the storage room, their contents slowly evaporating to create a protective barrier of humid air. A crash from the main room announced the collapse of the bar. The sound covered Cooper's movement as he triggered a hidden mechanism with his boot. Above them, barely visible through the smoke, ceiling panels shifted silently. "Wait," the second soldier said, his voice rising in panic. "We're going in circles." Before either man could react, Cooper's hand left Blackwood's neck and found 2 precise points at the base of their skulls. Pressure applied with surgical accuracy, the same technique he'd used to render unconscious soldiers who couldn't be sedated during battlefield surgery. Both men dropped without a sound. "What are you doing?" Blackwood managed through paralyzed lips, his eyes wide with understanding. "Giving you a front-row seat to a medical demonstration, Colonel." Cooper's voice remained clinical as he triggered another mechanism. A section of the floor rotated silently, revealing a small lift platform. "You're about to learn why they called me the ghost surgeon during the war." With practiced efficiency, Cooper secured Blackwood to the platform. The colonel's partial paralysis made him helpless to resist as Cooper activated the lift's counterweight system. They rose smoothly through the smoke toward the ceiling, emerging into a hidden observation space Cooper had built into the saloon's upper structure. From this vantage point, they could see the entire storage room through cleverly placed gaps. In the ceiling, the 2 unconscious soldiers lay below, surrounded by spreading flames that followed precise channels in the floor. "Amazing what you can learn about architecture when you study human anatomy," Cooper commented, securing Blackwood's position. "Buildings have pressure points too. weight-bearing structures that, when compromised, cause systematic collapse, just like the human body. Through the gaps, they could see more of Blackwood's men entering the storage room, searching for their leader. The fire had blocked their retreat to the main room, leaving them only one path forward, directly into Cooper's trap. "You're killing them all," Blackwood accused, his voice weak but horror-struck. "No, Colonel, I'm teaching them." Cooper's hands moved with practiced precision as he prepared a series of mechanisms, teaching them why men like you shouldn't threaten what I protect. Below, the soldiers discovered their unconscious comrades. Their shouts of alarm were cut short as Cooper activated his next set of traps. Weighted nets dropped from the ceiling, tangling them in precisely engineered snares. The fire continued its controlled advance, herding the remaining men exactly where Cooper wanted them. "A surgeon understands that treatment sometimes requires isolation," Cooper explained, his voice carrying the same tone he used when explaining medical procedures to patients. "Removing infected tissue to save the healthy, quarantining the disease, to protect the population." His hands moved across a series of levers and ropes. "Right now, Colonel, you're watching surgical precision applied to tactical warfare." From their elevated position, the saloon had become a theater of Cooper's design, with him, as both surgeon and conductor, orchestrating a precise symphony of controlled chaos and calculated destruction. From their elevated position, Cooper watched his trap unfold with clinical detachment. Below, the remaining soldiers struggled in the nets, the fire steadily advancing along its predetermined paths. But something in Blackwood's earlier words nagged at him, a piece of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. "Tell me, Colonel," Cooper said, adjusting the pressure points on Blackwood's neck to allow him to speak more clearly, "how did a Confederate cavalry officer become the leader of the Crimson Riders? The war's been over for 8 years. Blackwood's laugh was bitter even through his partial paralysis. "You really don't remember, do you? The hospital tent at Antietam wasn't our first meeting, Doctor." Cooper's hands stilled for a fraction of a second. "Explain." 1859, Kansas Territory. Blackwood's eyes gleamed in the firelight, filtering through the floor. "You weren't a surgeon then. You were just a young doctor working with the Marshal's office, investigating a series of mysterious deaths along the border." The memory hit Cooper like a physical blow. Before the war, before the armies, he had indeed worked with the U.S. Marshal's office, helping them track down criminals through medical evidence. But that case, the Porter's Creek murders, Cooper whispered. 9 families killed, all made to look like cholera deaths. 10 families, Blackwood corrected. "You just never found the last one." His smile was terrible to behold. "I was deputy. Marshal James Blackwood then. We worked together for 3 weeks, hunting what we thought was a gang of murderers." Cooper's mind raced back through the years. He remembered a younger Blackwood, badge gleaming on his chest, helping him examine bodies and interview witnesses. "You were investigating your own crimes. It was brilliant, wasn't it?" Despite his paralysis, pride crept into Blackwood's voice. "Using disease as a cover for murder. I learned that from you, Doctor. All those lectures you gave about how to tell natural death from foul play, I just reversed the process." Below them, one of the soldiers managed to call out, "Lieutenant, they're over here." The young Blackwood's voice responded from somewhere. "In the smoke," drawing closer. "Your son doesn't know," Cooper realized. "All these years he thinks you're just another Confederate officer turned outlaw." "Marcus believes what I want him to believe," Blackwood said. "That his father is a soldier who refused to surrender, who's fighting to rebuild something lost. He doesn't need to know about Porter's Creek or the other towns before the war, the families I practiced on while learning my technique." Cooper's hands tightened slightly, sending waves of pain through Blackwood's nervous system. "And after the war, the Crimson Riders? Just a continuation of my work, but bigger, better." Blackwood's eyes held a fanatic's gleam. "The war taught Me that death on a large scale conceals death by design. No one looks too closely at bodies during times of violence. No one questions why entire towns disappear. That's why you really came here, Cooper said, the final piece clicking into place. Not for revenge, not for a strategic location. You came because I was the only one who might recognize your old technique. And because you broke your own rules, Doctor. Blackwood's smile widened. At Antietam, you showed me that healers could be killers. That medical knowledge was the perfect weapon. I've spent years perfecting what you demonstrated in that hospital tent. The fire below cast writhing shadows across the ceiling as Cooper absorbed this revelation. All this time, he'd thought his actions during the war were his darkest secret. But they had merely been inspiration for something far worse. Your son is almost here, Cooper said quietly. He deserves to know the truth about what he's been fighting for. He deserves his illusions, Blackwood countered. We're not so different, Doctor. We both wear masks, both hide our true natures behind respectable facades. The only difference is I've embraced what I am. Cooper's hands moved to new pressure points on Blackwood's neck. No, Colonel, there is one key difference. His voice took on the precise tone of a medical lecture. I never enjoyed it. The sound of boots on wooden stairs echoed through the smoke-filled storage room. Lieutenant Marcus Blackwood was close now, searching for his father, with the desperate determination of a son who still believed in heroes. He's down there looking. For you, Cooper said softly, his fingers maintaining their precise hold on Blackwood's nerve points. Looking for the man he thinks you are, the noble Confederate officer, the principled warrior. His voice hardened. Not the monster who murdered children in Porter's Creek. And you'll what? Blackwood wheezed through his partially paralyzed throat. Tell him everything, destroy him, like you destroyed those raiders at Antietam? Father. Marcus's voice carried clearly now. Dr. Cooper, show yourselves. Cooper's mind raced through the implications. The lieutenant was young, probably no more than 25, born just before Porter's Creek. Had Blackwood been killing families while his own son slept peacefully in his cradle? He's a soldier, Blackwood continued, reading Cooper's hesitation. Trained since birth. You tell him the truth, he'll still try to kill you, die trying to avenge a lie. Through gaps in the floorboards, Cooper watched the lieutenant methodically searching the room, avoiding the fire's advance with professional skill. The young man's movements betrayed his military training, but there was something else there. A rigid adherence to protocol that spoke of desperate faith in order and authority. Did you train him yourself? Cooper asked, though he already knew the answer. Raise him on stories of military honor while teaching him to kill? I raised him to survive, Blackwood snapped. To be stronger than the weak masses who hide behind. Laws and morality, like you're hiding behind that bartender's apron. A crash from below pulled their attention. One of the trapped soldiers had managed to partially free himself from the nets, only to stumble into a burning barrel. The lieutenant rushed to help, his face illuminated by the flames, young, determined and hauntingly reminiscent of his father's old marshal's badge photographs. You're right about one thing, Cooper said, his hands shifting to new pressure points on Blackwood's neck. Telling him everything would destroy him, but not telling him makes me complicit in your lies. His fingers found the cluster of nerves that controlled speech. So I'm going to do what I should have done at Porter's Creek. I'm going to be a surgeon. What? What do you mean? Fear crept into Blackwood's voice. A surgeon removes disease. To save the patient, Cooper explained clinically. Sometimes that means cutting away healthy tissue that's been contaminated. Sometimes it means letting the patient face the pain of recovery. His grip tightened precisely. And sometimes it means letting old wounds bleed so they can finally heal clean. Father, Marcus called again, closer now. Answer me. Cooper leaned close to Blackwood's ear. I'm going to give you a choice, Colonel, the kind you never gave. Those families. His fingers shifted, allowing Blackwood more control over his speech. Tell him the truth yourself, or I'll demonstrate exactly what you taught me about making death look natural. Your son will live believing you died a hero, never knowing he's built his life on your lies. You wouldn't, Blackwood gasped. Your oath? My oath was to do no harm, Cooper replied. And sometimes, Colonel, the kindest cut is the one that hurts most. His hands remained steady, ready to either grant speech or end it permanently. Choose quickly. The fire won't wait, and neither will I. The fire had transformed Cooper's saloon into a vision of hell. Flames danced across the wooden beams, turning the storage room into a maze of shadow and light. From their hidden perch, Cooper could see Lieutenant Marcus methodically working, his way through the burning room, checking each trapped soldier, helping those he could reach. He's everything you're not, Cooper observed, watching the young man risk his life to save his comrades. Every lie you told him about honor and duty, he actually believes them, lives them. Blackwood's eyes tracked his son's movement, something like pride mixing with fear in his gaze. Then let him keep believing, let him have his truth. The truth? Cooper's hands shifted, sending a wave of pain through Blackwood's nervous system. Like the truth about the Miller family in Porter's. Creek? The youngest was just 4, as I recall. Did you make it look like cholera when you killed her too? The colonel's face twisted. You weren't there. You don't understand what it was like on the border before the war. The chaos, the weakness. Father, Marcus called again, closer now. I can hear voices. Where are you? Cooper felt Blackwood tense under his hands. The moment of choice was approaching. Below them, the fire had begun to consume the last safe path through the storage room. Soon, there would be no choices left to make. He's going to die trying to save you, Cooper said softly. Is that what you want? To add your own son to your collection of victims? I never. Blackwood started, then stopped. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his voice. Everything I did was to make him strong, to prepare him for the world's true nature. The heat was becoming unbearable in their hidden space. Cooper could feel sweat running down his back, but his hands remained steady on Blackwood's pressure. Points. Years of performing surgery under battlefield conditions had taught him to ignore physical discomfort. The world's true nature. Cooper's voice carried the sharp edge of a surgical blade. Or yours. A burning beam crashed nearby, sending sparks swirling through the air. Marcus spun toward the sound, his gun drawn. The firelight caught his face, revealing features that echoed his father's but remained untouched by cruelty. Cooper made a decision. His fingers found new pressure points on Blackwood's neck, ones he'd discovered during the war when treating soldiers with traumatic brain injuries. Let me show you something, Colonel. A little medical demonstration. What? What are you doing? Panic crept into Blackwood's voice as strange sensations began to flood his paralyzed body. Interesting thing about the human nervous system, Cooper explained in his clinical tone. Apply the right pressure, and you can trigger memory centers. In the brain, make a man relive moments of his past. Soldiers with battlefield trauma taught me this technique. His fingers pressed deeper. Shall we see what memories you've been hiding from yourself, Colonel? Blackwood's eyes widened as long-buried images began to surface. Cooper watched the colonel's face contort as he was forced to confront his own actions without the shield of justification he'd built around them. Father, Marcus's voice was desperate now, please answer me. The fire crept closer, and Cooper knew they were running out of time. His carefully constructed fortress was burning around them, taking with it years of preparation and planning. But perhaps, he thought, watching Blackwood struggle with his resurfaced memories, some forms of destruction were necessary for redemption. Your choice, Colonel, Cooper whispered, his hands ready to either maintain the flood of memories or end them forever. The truth or a hero's death. But choose quickly. The fire isn't as selective about its victims as you were. Through the smoke and flames, Marcus finally spotted the hidden entrance to their elevated position. Cooper watched the realization dawn on the lieutenant's face as he discovered the complex system of pulleys and counterweights that had allowed them to vanish. "Up there," Marcus called to his remaining men. "They're in some kind of hidden room." Blackwood's body tensed under Cooper's hands as his son's footsteps approached the makeshift ladder. The memories Cooper had forced him to confront still played. Behind his eyes, decades of carefully buried guilt bubbling to the surface. "Last chance, Colonel," Cooper said quietly. "Tell him yourself, or die knowing your lies will haunt him forever." The ladder creaked under Marcus's weight. The fire had nearly reached their position, turning the air into a shimmering wall of heat. Cooper's fingers remained steady on Blackwood's pressure points, even as sweat dripped into his eyes. "Father!" Marcus's head appeared through the trapdoor, gun drawn. He froze at the sight before him, his father partially paralyzed, the doctors, hands positioned with surgical precision on his neck. "Don't move, Lieutenant," Cooper warned. "Your father's life depends on the steady pressure of my fingers. One wrong move, and his nervous system shuts down permanently." Marcus's gun wavered between them, his training warring with his fear for his father's life. "Let him go, Doctor. Whatever grievance you have." "Tell him," Cooper interrupted, speaking. "To Blackwood. Tell him about Porter's Creek, about the families, about what you were before the war made killing legal." "Father?" Uncertainty crept into Marcus's voice. "What is he talking about?" Blackwood's eyes met his son's, and Cooper felt the colonel's pulse spike under his fingers. The moment stretched like a surgery's final crucial stitch. "Everything, balanced on the precision of the next move. Blackwood started, then stopped. Something broke in his voice. "Marcus, my son, I'm not who you think I am." "Don't listen to him," Cooper said, his fingers shifting to allow Blackwood clearer speech. "Listen to yourself. How many towns have the riders destroyed under your father's orders? How many people have disappeared? Did you never wonder why he chose such specific targets?" The gun in Marcus's hand trembled slightly. "We're soldiers. We fight for the cause." "There is no cause," Blackwood interrupted, his voice raw with forced truth. "There never was. Not for me." His eyes locked onto his son's face, drinking in these final moments of innocent faith. "Before the war, before you were old enough to remember, I killed—" "He was a U.S. Marshal," Cooper finished as Blackwood's voice failed. "Who murdered 9 families in Porter's Creek, made it look like cholera. I was the doctor who helped investigate the deaths, never knowing the killer was working beside me." Marcus's face went pale. "No, that's not— Father, tell him he's lying." 10 families, Blackwood whispered, echoing his earlier confession. "The 10th was never found, and Porter's Creek wasn't the first, wasn't the last." The fire roared around them now, consuming Cooper's carefully built sanctuary. The heat was unbearable, but no one moved. They were trapped in a moment outside time, where truth burned hotter than flames. "Every raid," Blackwood continued, his words coming faster now, like blood from an opened vein. "Every town we took, it wasn't for territory or revenge. It was because I needed it. The power, the precision, making death look natural, like I learned all those years ago." Marcus's gun clattered to the floor. "All those years," he whispered. "All the training, the discipline, the stories of honor." His voice cracked. "I built my life on your lies." "No," Blackwood said desperately. "Everything I taught you about strength, about survival, was just another lie," Cooper interrupted. "But your son lived those lies better than you ever could, made them into real honor, real strength." The flames reached the edge of their hidden room. Soon the choice of truth or lies wouldn't matter. Fire would claim them all, unless they acted now. "Marcus," Cooper said, his voice carrying the authority of both surgeon and judge, Your father has a debt to pay. Justice that's been waiting. Since Porter's Creek, the question is, what kind of justice will you choose? The fire had transformed Cooper's carefully constructed fortress into a crucible of judgment. Flames licked through the floorboards, casting wild shadows across three men trapped in a moment of terrible truth. Marcus stood frozen, his dropped, gun forgotten at his feet as the foundations of his world burned away. "We need to move," Cooper said, his hands still steady on Blackwood's nerve points. "This whole section is about to collapse." But neither father nor son seemed to hear him, locked in a stare that contained decades of lies and love. "Everything," Marcus whispered, his voice hollow. "Every lesson about honor, about duty. It was all just cover for murder." "Not everything," Blackwood pleaded. "The strength I taught you. The discipline of a killer." Cooper interrupted. "The strength of a man who murdered children and called it necessity." A burning beam crashed through one corner of their hiding space, sending sparks swirling around them like fireflies. The heat was becoming unbearable, but Cooper's hands remained steady. Years of battlefield surgery had taught him that sometimes the most critical moments came when everything was falling apart. "We have to make a choice," Cooper said. "Fast. The fire's reaching the whiskey storage. When those barrels go, let it burn," Marcus said suddenly, his voice hardening. "Let it all burn." He looked at his father with new eyes. A surgeon's eyes cutting away diseased tissue. "How many, father? How many towns after Porter's Creek? How many families?" Blackwood's pulse jumped under Cooper's fingers. "Marcus, son, please, don't call me that." The younger man's shout was nearly lost in the roar of flames. "A son should be his father's legacy. Is that what I am? A legacy of murder?" Cooper felt Blackwood's muscles tense, preparing to speak, but whatever he might have said was cut off by an explosion from below. The whiskey barrels had caught. The blast sent tremors through the entire structure, and Cooper knew they had minutes. "At most, the building's going," he announced. "Either we move now or we die here." "Then we die," Marcus said quietly, like all his other victims. But Cooper was already moving, his surgeon's instincts taking over. With precise pressure on specific nerve points, he forced Blackwood's body to stand. "No one else dies tonight," he declared. "Not even him. Death's too easy, too clean." "What are you doing?" Marcus demanded, as Cooper began maneuvering his paralyzed father toward a hidden exit he'd installed years ago. "Being a surgeon," Cooper replied. "Sometimes healing means keeping the patient alive to face the consequences of their actions." His hands shifted, maintaining control of Blackwood's nervous system while guiding him forward. "There's a federal marshal in Denver who'll be very interested in closing some old cases. Porter's Creek, the other towns before the war, all those natural deaths that never quite made sense." Another explosion rocked the building. Through gaps in the burning floor, they could see the remaining Crimson Riders fleeing the inferno, abandoning their trapped comrades to the flames. The sight seemed to break something in Marcus's rigid posture. "Help me!" Cooper commanded, and something in his voice, the same tone that had commanded battlefield medics through artillery barrages, cut through Marcus's shock. Together, they began moving Blackwood toward the escape route. The colonel tried to resist, but Cooper's knowledge of the human body was too precise, too practiced. Each attempt at struggle was met with carefully applied pressure that sent waves of pain through specific nerve clusters. "Consider this your final lesson. In medicine, Colonel," Cooper said, as they maneuvered through the burning building, "the difference between a butcher and a surgeon isn't in the cutting, it's in the healing that comes after." They emerged onto the roof, just as the main structure began to collapse. The night air was shockingly cool after the inferno, filled with shouts and the sound of burning timber. Below, the townspeople had formed a bucket line, trying to keep the fire from spreading to neighboring buildings. "All those years studying how to make death look natural," Cooper continued, his hands maintaining their precise hold. "Now you'll face something far worse. Living with the truth. The sound of galloping hooves announced the arrival of Sheriff Mills and a posse from the neighboring town. They had seen the fire from miles away. As lawmen surrounded the burning saloon, Cooper turned to Marcus. "Your father spent decades hiding his true nature behind a badge, behind a uniform, behind causes, and wars and lies. The real justice isn't in killing him. It's in stripping away those hiding places, forever." Marcus looked at his father, then at the burning saloon, then back at Cooper. In the young man's eyes, something shifted. The last pieces of childhood faith burning away, replaced by a harder, cleaner truth. "The truth," Marcus said finally, as his father's men were rounded up and the town's bucket line fought back the flames. "That's what you've been fighting for all along, isn't it, Doctor? Not revenge, just truth." Cooper's hands, steady as ever, made one final adjustment to Blackwood's nerve points, ensuring he would live to face justice. "A surgeon's first duty is to do no harm," he said quietly. "Sometimes that means cutting away lies, no matter how much it hurts." Dawn broke over Whiskey Creek, painting the smoke-stained sky in shades of amber and gold. The saloon's ruins still smoldered, sending thin tendrils of smoke spiraling into the morning air. Cooper stood among the debris, his surgeon's hands now, holding a simple broom as he swept away ash and broken glass. Sheriff Mills approached, his boots crunching on charred wood. "Federal marshals taking Blackwood and his men to Denver," he said, watching Cooper work. "Marcus went with them, said he needed to see it through to the end." Cooper nodded, continuing his methodical sweeping. The motion was familiar, the same steady rhythm he'd once used to clean surgical theaters after particularly difficult operations. "Town's taking up a collection," Mills continued, "to help rebuild the saloon. Widow Chen's already offering her back room for temporary service." He paused, studying Cooper's face. "Unless you're planning to move on." Cooper stopped sweeping, looking up at the sunrise. The light caught the remaining bottles that had survived the fire, sending prisms dancing across the scorched floorboards. "You know what I am now," he said quietly. "What I've done, what I can do. What I know," Mills replied, "is that when those bastards threatened our children, you stood between them and harm. When they tried to take our town, you stopped them." He gestured to the ruins. "This place wasn't just a saloon, Cooper. It was a sanctuary for all of us." Sarah Mackenzie appeared with a pot of coffee, steam rising in the cool morning air. She poured 3 cups, handing them out without a word. Her hands shook slightly, but her eyes were clear and determined. "Henry's fever broke last night," she said, referring to her son. "While you were fighting the fire, Dr. Pierce said it was thanks to the medicine you gave him last week." She met Cooper's gaze steadily. "A killer wouldn't have spent 3 days teaching the doctor how to brew that fever tonic." Cooper's fingers traced the rim of his coffee cup, feeling the familiar texture of ceramic instead of surgical steel. "I made a promise once," he said, "to do no harm. Some would say I broke that promise." "No," came a new voice. Old Jenkins emerged. From the crowd that had gathered, his face still smudged with smoke. "You kept it the only way you could, by stopping those who would do worse." One by one, the townspeople stepped forward. The miners who'd shared his whiskey, the farmers who'd sought his advice, the children he'd treated for scrapes and fevers. Each had a story of healing, of help given without question or cost. "The saloon can be rebuilt," Mills said finally. "Stronger this time, better prepared." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face, though maybe with fewer hidden passages. Cooper looked at the ruins of his fortress, seeing not what was lost, but what could be rebuilt. The wooden boards could be replaced, the bottles restocked, the sanctuary restored. "First drinks on the house," he said quietly, and a ripple of relief passed through the crowd. "Once we get the walls up." They worked through the day, clearing debris and salvaging what could be saved. Cooper's hands moved with their usual precision, but now they guided hammers and saws instead of surgical tools. Each nail driven, each board placed, was a step toward healing, not just for the building, but for the town itself. As evening approached, Cooper found himself behind a makeshift bar in Widow Chen's back room. The familiar weight of a glass in his hand felt right, felt true. A healer could work in many ways, he realized, sometimes with medicine, sometimes with a steady pour of whiskey, and sometimes, when necessary, with the precise knowledge of how to stop those who would harm the innocent. "Your usual?" he asked Jenkins, who'd taken his customary seat at the temporary bar. The old man smiled, the light of the setting sun catching in his eyes. "Seems to me, Doc, every drink from here on out is something new." Cooper poured 2 glasses, his hands as steady as they'd ever been in any surgical theater. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. As the sun set on Whiskey Creek, the toast was echoed by dozens of voices. The shadows of the past were just that, shadows, unable to stand against the light of truth and the warmth of community. Cooper had finally found his true calling, not just as a healer of bodies, but as a protector of souls. The whiskey caught the last light of day, glowing like amber promises in simple glass vessels. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, perhaps. But for now, in this moment, the steady hands of the surgeon turned bartender poured hope, one drink at a time.